Today we will talk about David Hume, who is another one on this line of early modern philosophers. We mentioned at the beginning, remember when we said that we can divide them into two groups. What were the two groups, by the way? Do you remember? Rationalists and empiricists. And what's the differences? Rationalists, remember, they are kind of all armchair philosophers. They think you can just get to everything right in your head. You don't need experience. It's already there. It's like this pre-installed stuff which is there when you're born. Empiricists disagree. They think that for the most part, if not completely, you need to have experience in order to know things. So Hume is again empiricist, just like Berkeley was. And he does kind of respond to the same problems. But first, let's refresh your memory on Berkeley, and those are again the questions you may have on the exam. What is naive realism according to Berkeley? Yeah.
It's the belief that the properties we perceive objects to have are the properties that they really do have in the external world. Exactly.
That is exactly the correct answer. So believing that the black chair is really black, that the cube is really... Remember, because for Berkeley, it's not just the colors and sounds. It also are actual shapes, sizes. So he disagreed with Locke on that. He thought that those are also dependent on the perceiver, and they are not real qualities. It's naive to think that they are. It's naive to think that the objects really are what we think they are. Then what is solipsism? We mentioned it's one of the options if you accept Berkeley's theory. Remember, then three options emerge. One of them is solipsism, yeah.
That the reality outside of your mind doesn't exist?
Yeah, that your mind is the only thing which exists. And like there's literally nothing else. No other minds, no other people, no other objects, nothing at all. And then, of course, is not what Berkeley himself would like it to be. But this is one of the options. And two other options are with God feeding him the ideas which are copy of God's ideas, or the God giving him ideas which are not copies of his ideas and are different from God's ideas. And both of them are also not what Berkeley would probably like, because if they are not the same as God's ideas, like remember, if we have God, and God has some ideas, and we have mind, like my mind or your mind, doesn't matter. And God, when he gives us his ideas, if they are not what they are for God. If for God the cube is like, I don't know, something like this, and he tells us that cube is something like this, then God is lying. God is deceiving us. He's not giving us the real stuff. We also don't know why he's doing this. But if they are, if everything we get is exactly what God perceives it, then it's pantheism. It seems like our mind participates in the mind of God. So those are the choices if you accept Berkeley. Somebody actually asked it last time. Like, if you don't accept Berkeley, you're not stuck with this, obviously. But if you do, it seems like this is the three choices. It's either solipsism, or God is lying, or God is part of the mind. Berkeley himself probably would not agree with any one of the three, but while he was still alive, nobody asked him about that. And now it's too late. So we don't know what he would have answered. Next, the apple. What, according to Berkeley, the word apple refers to? Yeah.
Is it a bundle of sensations?
Bundle of sensations, right? The taste, what you see with your eyes, the look or whatever you call it, the smell, but those are all sensations. And he was saying that there is no matter inside the apple, because what is the matter? Sensations are for sure something we have, but matter? I don't have any matter. Well, I don't know who does. Then according to Berkeley, what or who causes our ideas of objects? Well, it's kind of already answered, right? So who? God. God is the correct answer. What did Berkeley think the word matter refers to?
Something that's there.
Something that is there? What did he refer to? We do. When we say matter, we refer to something which is there. But what would Berkeley say matter is? Nothing. Nothing at all. That's his whole point. There is no matter. It's all in your head. In fact, it's not even in your head because there's no head. It's in your mind, which is completely immaterial. And so, what did Berkeley call his own philosophical position based on that? Yeah.
Immaterialism?
Immaterialism. But we today, what would we call his position? We have a slightly different word. Idealism. Remember, idealism. That's what idealism is. So he didn't use the word idealism, but this is idealism. There are different varieties of idealism, but it starts with Berkeley, and that's what idealism is. Basically, your mind and the content of your mind is all there is. Maybe other minds and content of other minds, your mind, content of your mind, God, content of God's mind, but no physical objects. Okay, and finally, what did Berkeley say space referred to? Kind of a little bit of strange way to ask it, but remember what did he in general say about space and time? Are they real? For Newton, space and time were absolute. But for Berkeley, they are relative to the perceiver. Relative to the perceiver, so the correct answer would be a feature of experience that is relative to the perceiver. That's what space is, and that's what time is. Okay, now let's look at Hume. David Hume. David Hume is a Scottish philosopher. So we're still in the British Isles, except Berkeley was Irish, and Hume is Scottish. He was born in Edinburgh, Scotland, in 1711, so he's younger than Berkeley, although they overlap a little bit. Berkeley was still alive, but Hume is much, much, much younger than Berkeley. He could be Berkeley's son, really. Calvinist family, attended Edinburgh University. In his 20s, very young, he already wrote a treatise of human nature. He went to France for several years, and he wrote a treatise of human nature. Now, that book did not really impress anybody. Today, we consider it a classic. Back when Hume wrote it, almost no one read it, and he was very discouraged by this. He thought he gave the world this wonderful book, and nobody is reading. It's the case with many philosophers, by the way. Some of them only become famous after they die, especially closer to our time. So nobody cared, very badly received. Then he tried to kind of salvage it. He put a slightly different version, an inquiry concerning human understanding. The reading was from the inquiry. It is shorter, more to the point, and he kind of developed it so it would be easier to read. Still didn't make much of an effect. In fact, his life at first was not very successful. He applied for the chair of philosophy at the Edinburgh University. They rejected him. Then he applied to the chair, another chair of philosophy. They rejected him too. Finally, closer towards the end, he published the History of England. Not even philosophy book, history book. That one got very popular. This is what gave him finally a job and money and so on. And so he actually, towards the end of his life, became famous, but not for his philosophy. His philosophy mainly became well known after his death. And this is when it slowly kind of dawned on people. One of the reasons was Kant, who we'll talk about next week. Kant actually read Hume, and Hume did have a huge impression on him. Okay, he finally died in 1776. Now let's look at what he was trying to achieve. First was the treatise. a treatise was an attempt to kind of put the human knowledge on a solid foundation. It is ironic because towards the end, it turned out that there's no solid foundation. He didn't find any solid foundation. In fact, he questioned pretty much everything. But the beginning tells us that the most direct road to knowledge is, instead of taking now and then a castle or village on the frontier, to march directly to the capital or center of the sciences, to the human nature itself, which being once masters of, we may everywhere else hope to have an easy victory. So let's figure out what is the nature of the human being and understand ourselves. Okay, so how does he do it? He still works with the same material as Locke and Berkeley, but he changes it a little bit. First of all, they both talked about ideas. Now he uses the word idea, but in a different sense. He says there are two things, impressions and ideas. Both of them are a type of perception. The perception is the content of our consciousness, right? We perceive things. But what's the difference? Impressions are original experiences. Like right now, when I see this table, that's an impression. When you hear me, that's an impression. What would be the idea? If tomorrow you remember what was happening, that would be the idea. So idea is what you have in your mind after the fact. And he also said they are parasitic on impressions, because all ideas we get from impressions. But impressions are lively and real, because when you see something, that moment, it has so much color, so much detail, right? But if you try to remember it even 5 minutes later, like if right now you close your eyes and try to remember exactly what did you see a second ago, you will remember some stuff, but it's not going to be as good, right? And the further in the future, the more pale it will get. Like a year from now, somebody asks you, on this day when you were sitting in the philosophy class, what was happening? You'll be like, no, something, we were in a room, right? Professor was blubbing something. That's pretty much all you can remember. So that is what is the connection between them. So impressions are the original experience, more lively perceptions when we hear, see, feel, love, hate, desire, or will. That is also impression, right? At the moment when you love somebody, that is an impression. When you no longer love them, a few years down the road, you remember it, that's an idea. If you get mad at somebody, the moment when you are mad, that is the impression. If next day you remember how you were mad, that's an idea. So that's how he distinguished it. So ideas, less forceful copies or faint images of our impressions. They are faint images of former experiences, such as memories. That's the distinction he made. That's already kind of making ideas different. You see, it's different from what Locke thought ideas were, because for Locke there's no difference. It's an idea when I see other people, and it's an idea when I remember it tomorrow. But here, first is impression, second is idea. Idea is a parasitic on impression. The creative power of a mind amounts to no more than the faculty of compounding, transposing, augmenting, or diminishing the material afforded by the senses of experience. So we have experience. This is what kind of feeds all this stuff into our mind on a daily basis. You see tables, chairs, you meet other people, you hear the sounds, blah, 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 blah. It starts when you're born. Right? When you're born, you're already bombarded with all this stuff, except at first you don't understand what the hell is going on. Who are all these people? Then you slowly work and work and work on it in your mind, sort it out, put it into different categories, start understanding language, and build up basically what you have inside your mind today. And that is basically all we have. So remember, he's empiricist. He does not think that when we are born there's anything there. But those impressions you get, you work with them, and that's where you get all this stuff. Now, just as Newton set out the laws governing physical particles. The task of philosophy, according to Hume, to set out the laws controlling mental particles. What are these laws? Well, according to Hume, the idea is connected through the laws of association. There is a principle of connection between different thoughts or ideas of the mind, and that in their appearance to the memory or imagination, they introduce each other with a certain degree or method of regularity. Of course, the ideas follow each other in certain order. What exactly is this order? There is actually three principles. First, resemblance. Ideas that are similar tend to be associated together. Picture leading to a thought of the original, right? Association. Somebody shows you a picture of, I don't know, your friend, you think about your friend. So resembling your friend, even though picture clearly is not your friend, but it resembles your friend. So that's one way we associate ideas. Then the idea of your friend and the idea of the picture is associated. Contiguity is another way. Ideas that appear together in space and time tend to be linked together in thought. Apartments in a building. You think about one apartment, since you know there's another apartment adjacent to that, then you may think about this other one. Then if the building stands next to, I don't know, a church, you may think about the church and so on. And then cause and effect. Cause and effect is very important. And hopefully you did the reading that was on cause and effect. When one event regularly succeeds another, we tend to associate them. Wound, pain. There's a good example with child being born. Does the child know where the fire will burn or her? No, probably not. There's nothing really about the fire which tells you this. If you look at the burning fire, it looks nice. You'd think you'll stick your finger there and it will actually feel good. But when you do stick your finger in there, what happens? Yeah, it's not fun. And as a child, you probably did something like this, because children like sticking their fingers everywhere, and your parents try to prevent that, but it's almost impossible. And then you discover it burns, so in the future you would know that, right? You would think, okay, I better don't do that anymore, because that's not fun at all. So that is cause and effect. We expect certain things follow certain other things. Now he is the first one who actually distinguished two kinds of reasoning. This is what we talk about more in Philosophy 102. So two different types of reasoning: relation of ideas and matters of fact. What are the differences? Relation of ideas is something which happens in our head. Relation of ideas would be mathematics. That's a great example. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. That is necessary truth. Why are they necessary? Because this is something which is not dependent on experience. You don't need any experience to know that 2 plus 2 will be equal to 4. That is just already kind of part of the mind itself. This type of reasoning is called a priori because it's prior to experience. A priori means just that before or prior to something. Matters of fact, on the other hand, are not like this. And they actually can only be learned through experience. The example of the fire burning your finger. It's not like 2 plus 2 equals 4, right? You can even now imagine that fire would not burn your finger. You know it will burn, but you could imagine it would not. There's no, it's not like imagining a 2 plus 2 equals 5. I don't know how you can imagine 2 plus 2 equals 5. That seems to be just crazy. But I can imagine fire not burning. And another example with gravity too, right? We know there's gravity. We know if we drop something, it will fall. But is it necessary? Well, now we are flying into outer space, so we actually know that there's no gravity there. And we know more about how it works. Back then, they were not flying anywhere, so for all they knew, there's gravity everywhere. And they knew there was gravity. But unless you have experience, how would you know that? As a child, again, just like with fire, right? Why would you expect gravity? You wouldn't expect it. But once you start dropping things and you keep on falling down, you realize there's actually gravity. However, these types of things are based on experience. They are a posteriori, posterior to experience, after the experience. You have to first have experience, then you know. And as we talk about in 102, while these things are necessary, so they are always true. These things are not always true. In fact, you need to have experience, and even if you have experience, later on you may turn out to be wrong. Because many of these things which you observe could go some other way. Try to predict the future. You can almost never predict what will happen in the future. Even if you know the past, you know it's been happening in the past. Does it mean that the same thing will happen in the future? Not necessarily. Okay. We talk more about it in 102. So here's a quote. When we entertain, therefore, any suspicion that a philosophical term is employed without any meaning or idea, as is but too frequent, we need but inquire, from what impression is that supposed idea derived? And if it be impossible to assign any, this will serve to confirm our suspicion. So what is he talking about here? What ideas is he talking about in philosophy which we don't know where they come from? We talked about different philosophers already for quite a while. What did some of them claim? Remember Plato's forms. Plato was talking about forms. All the attempts to prove the idea of God. The idea of God itself. So this is what he is hitting at. He's saying, do you have any experience of any? Can you be sure these things exist? And if the answer is no, he's saying, then you are just speculating and you have no right to do that. So here's the next interesting quote. That's actually a famous quote of his. He says, when we run over our libraries persuaded by these principles, what havoc must we make? If we take in hand any volume of divinity or school metaphysics, for instance, let us ask, does it contain any abstract reasoning concerning quality or number? This. No. Does it contain any experimental reasoning concerning matter of fact and experience? No. Commit it then to the flames, for it contains nothing but sophistry and illusion. So, what do you think he's talking about? This guy. What kind of books? Can you think of any book he would then commit to the flames?
Bible?
Huh?
Is it the Bible?
A Bible. Yeah. Any kind of book which is written with this type of speculation, he would say you should just burn it because it's completely useless. So hopefully now you see why he didn't get a chair of philosophy at the time. Like that was still a little too early for this type of ideas, even though he later became famous, but at the time it was way too revolutionary. Nonetheless, he is a very strict empiricist, and he is laying out the foundation of this scientific thinking, which actually is very prominent today, right? He's saying, we have this, which we know to be true. We have this stuff which we observe around us, and we can be more or less confident that is what's happening. Everything else is a speculation, and philosophers keep on speculating about the things they don't know, and making stuff up which has no foundation in reality, really. All right. Now, remember we already mentioned that, the question of the self. So he started questioning that. Descartes was pretty sure he knew what he was talking about, but he said, I think, therefore I am. So that's famous Descartesian, Cartesian, really the Cartesian formula. I think, therefore I am. And Hume was the one who asked, what is this I? Whose I? Do you have any idea what I is? What is the self? first of all, in regards to substances, remember Locke was pretty sure that there are physical substances and mental substances. He just said, I don't know what they are. Berkeley said, questioned the physical substances. He said, wait a minute. When we talk about substance, we don't experience it, so there cannot be any physical substance. There's no matter. But for Berkeley, there were minds, so there was spiritual substance. Now Hume goes further. He says, what is a spiritual substance? What is this? We don't have any better idea about it than we did about the physical one, so that also doesn't exist. Think about what's happening in your head every second. There are certain pictures, right, consecutively going through, certain sounds, certain feelings. It does seem to interact somewhere within your mind. But that's all you really have. What is this I? Can you pick this I? You say, no, you can't. All you know is that thinking is happening, pictures succeeding each other. In fact, if you think about it in terms of time, again, remember that even with the Greek philosophers, we were questioning that already. How do I know I am the same person now as 30 years ago? What does it even mean to say that? Like my body changes all the time, thoughts change all the time. What is there which makes me the same person as that young guy 20, 30, 40 years ago? What is it? It seems like there's really nothing we can point our finger at.
Probably your DNA, because everyone's different.
Well,
in a way, like everyone
obviously
has their own genetic code.
Yeah, the Hume didn't know about DNA. But, does DNA really make me what I am? That seems,
It's what sets you different from another person, because you guys don't all have the same exact.
no, yeah, DNA is an interesting thing, right? But at the same time, siblings sometimes have very similar DNA. Does it mean they're more of the same thing as two people who are not siblings? Doesn't seem like necessarily the case, right? So what exactly is DNA and how does it make me who I am is still a big question. It seems like it does have an impact as to my traits, like what kind of hair color I have, eye color, even whether I'm a cheerful person, a sad person. But there's still something else there which I'm not sure maybe DNA actually has something like that. But we don't even know it yet for sure. Right? And Hume obviously didn't know about DNA. They didn't have this word back then. So for him it was even a little more difficult. So anyway, he basically says we don't know what the self is. He's not denying the fact that there is self. But he's saying we don't know what it is. And we can't confidently, when Descartes says I think, he's making too much of an assumption. He's making an assumption that he knows this I. And he says, no, you don't. There is something going on inside your head, and something is doing some sort of thinking. That's all you can assume from that. That is a fact. The fact that you exist, that's already an assumption. So that's one of his other famous quotes. So let me just read it. He says, a person is nothing but a bundle or collection of different perceptions which succeed each other with an inconceivable rapidity and in perpetual flux and movement. The mind is a kind of a feeder where several perceptions successfully make their appearance, pass, repass, glide away, mingle in an infinite variety of postures and situations. There is properly no simplicity at any one time, nor identity at different. Whatever natural propension we may have to imagine that simplicity and identity. So it's easier for us to say it in this sense. I can say, yeah, I am still the same person I was 30 years ago. Is it really true? And Hume says, not necessarily. In fact, that somebody, I don't remember who said, imagine this. Imagine you are born every morning, you live just one day, and as soon as you go to bed, you die. But, you have this fake memory inserted into your head of supposedly living this entire life prior to this day. How would you know the difference? You wouldn't. So you could literally be born every day as a different person. Absolutely certain that you live for like, I don't know, 30 years or something as this person. Just because you have all these memories. But what if they're all fake? You would never know the difference. How would you know the difference? Right? So that's his point. With the causality, he also makes an example of the sun rising tomorrow and all these other things. He's saying, yeah, we see them all the time. One thing always seems to follow the other. Every single time I touch fire, it burns me. Fair enough, but that's not a priori. That's not the type of reasoning like 2 plus 2 equals 5. It still is based on experience, and everything based on experience is not 100%. It is, at best, 99.9999%. Many nines, but not 100. We think that they do. All these laws of nature, including gravity, what do we know about them? Even today, not so much. Really not so much. We know they've been in operation all our life, and it seems like the lives of other people who lived before us, but would they be still in operation 1 billion years from now, 2 billion years from now? No. Seems like they should be, but we cannot be completely sure. So that is his biggest contribution here. He is questioning the law of cause and effect as a necessity. He's saying there are two propositions and they are far from being the same. I have found that such an object has always been attended with such an effect. Every time I touch fire, I get burned. But it's different from I foresee that other objects which are in appearance similar will be attended with similar effects. Now that is already going a little bit too far. And billiard balls, he talks about billiard balls here, there. Like if you see two billiard balls collide, do they necessarily have to go in the opposite direction the way they do in real life? Or would it be completely contrary to reason that they just stop? It seems like it would not be contrary to reason. It's just from experience we know that this is the way they behave. They kind of hit each other and then go in opposite directions. But that doesn't necessarily have to be. So this is the four things which are in causal judgments. The first three, he says, are real. The fourth one is not. So the first one is when we have causal judgment, one thing causing another, we find that contiguity of the events in space, so they make contact. In order for me to hit this bottle off the table, I need to actually touch it, right? I cannot just do it with my sight, look at it very hard, and then it falls by itself. It has to touch it. Priority in time. One thing should precede the other. So before the bottle falls, I have to hit it. I cannot, first it falls and then I hit it. That doesn't make sense. That's priority in time. Constant conjunction of two events in the past experience. Yes, if every time you drop a bottle it falls, if every time you touch fire and it burns, then of course you say one thing causes the other. If, like for example, in your past, sometimes you touched fire, it burned you, other times it didn't, you cannot say that it caused it. But the fourth thing, he says, necessary connection, that's not real. That is what we presume. We presume based on our experience. It's true. For all of us, it always worked this way, so we're saying it's necessary. He's saying, no, actually, it still is not necessary. It's contingent. If we are honest with ourselves, we cannot be sure that the gravity will always work, cannot be sure that the fire will always burn us, and so on. So that fourth one necessary connection is not real. We add it on. We add it on ourselves. We kind of make it up. Necessary connection is something else. All events seem entirely loose and separate. One event follows the other, but we never can observe the tie between them. They seem conjoined, but never connected. Now, that's an interesting way to look at it, and we will see that actually Kant disagrees with you. Kant finds a way to explain the necessity, which is crucial to understanding Kant. If you understand what Hume was saying, you will be able to understand his Kant's answer, which is why it's important to start with Hume. Kant is, of course, very interesting, but he responds to Hume. He responds to this challenge. Hume is saying, okay, for us 2 plus 2 equals 4 is necessary. But for us, gravity is not necessary. Burning fire is not necessary. It's just that every time we see it, that's what happens, so we kind of add the necessity. What is the difference between them, and why is it still necessary for us? Why can we still think of the causal connections? Will be Kant's answer. Immanuel Kant. So the principle of induction, that is something we mentioned in Philosophy 101, is very simple. This is how we build all our life really on this principle. In the past, every time people dropped an object, it fell. The laws of nature will continue to operate in the future just as they have in the past. Therefore, if I drop my pen now, it will fall. Right? That's how we live our life. We expect things to follow these principles. We know that, I don't know, if we get hit with something, it will hurt. We know that if you do certain things, there will be certain consequence. And that's how we kind of build our life. We are, as children, learned all those things, and now we are navigating them according to these rules, and it works for us. It works. But that principle of nature, how do we know it to be true? How do we know that these things will always be working? His answer is we can't know it for sure. We can know it with a very high degree of probability. But probability is all we have. This is not necessity. Probability is different from necessity because it always allows for the possibility things will not work the way we expect them to. And you know it again from your experience too. Do things always work the way you expect them to work? No. No matter how well you plan something, no matter how sure you are, there's always a possibility of something going on. Like even the things which seem so certain, something can interfere. Never mind, like, I guess the laws of nature don't stop working. But even within the laws of nature, if you're planning for a certain thing to go a certain way, there's always a possibility it's not going to work a certain way. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say if somebody holds the gun to their head and pulls the trigger and the gun is loaded. Well, we know that that will kill them. But is it 100%? No. The gun can jam, right? That's a possibility. So then nothing happens. So that's an example how even the most certain things may not go the way you want them to go. There's just so many different variations in reality. And he says, I'm not denying causality. That's a big mistake people sometimes make. They say, oh, so he says there's no causality. He's saying, no. I'm not saying there's no causality. I'm just saying we have no grounds to be sure there is causality, which is not the same thing, right? Just to give you an example. Is it impossible that there is a cat in another room right now? It's possible, right? So, however, I can say that we're not sure if there's a cat there, and you will agree with me. We really are not sure. We don't know that. Which is not the same as saying there's no cat. Same thing with causality. He's not saying there's no causality. He's just saying we can't be sure there is causality. And that is his point. I never asserted so absurd a proposition that anything might arise without a cause. I only maintained that the certainty of the falsehood of proposition proceeded neither from intuition nor demonstration, but from another source. So intuition, demonstration, that is, we never saw this with certainty, it doesn't follow some rules of our mind, it is just something else. What else is it? A matter of habit. We have experienced it many times, we expected to experience it again, and it does work for us. But that is not the same thing as knowing for sure that it will have to happen. The answer for why where does this belief come from? The belief in causality is from custom or habit. Now about his ethics. He actually is very important also in modern ethics. His ideas had some interesting impact. Kant will disagree with him completely. Nonetheless, his approach is influential. So he put the emphasis from reason on passion, on feelings. He actually says, well, people who think that we are driven by reason are completely confused. In fact, we are driven by feelings. Moral philosophy seems hitherto to have received less improvement than geometry or physics, right? Because people keep on talking about moral philosophy, but everybody has different explanations, and unlike physics, we don't have any progress there. So he tried to use the scientific approach, and he says if you use the scientific approach, the results actually will be very puzzling. This is what we can find then. Could relation of ideas be the source of morality? So 2 plus 2 equals 4, this type of thing. Is this where we get the morality from? If that was true, ethical truth would be just as certain as mathematics. Right? Like, you shall not kill would have been absolutely clear to us. The mind could discover them without any experience. Some philosophers do believe that, but Hume says no. Reason is only used to discover truth or falsehood. You can discover where things are really this way or some other way. But you cannot discover what should be. You don't get from is to ought. Is, like if the person is being murdered and you see the scene of the crime, right? You know there is a body on the floor. You know it's a dead body. You know somebody took their life. Does it mean that you shall not kill? No, where are you getting that from? All you have is a dead body. Right? Like, how can you base your ought, what ought to be done, on just seeing this dead body? You can't even say whether they were right or wrong killing this person, because you need to dig deeper and figure out what happened. So reason, according to Hume, is wholly inactive, can never be the source of active principle as conscience or sense of morals. How about matters of fact? Can they be the source of morality? Can we get morality from the experience, from what we see? According to him, that also is not the case. If you look at the scene of the crime, even Sherlock Holmes, famous detective, could not see, touch, taste, feel, or hear moral wrongness. It's not something you experience, right? He's saying you would see, again, the body on the floor, you can smell the smoke of the gun being fired. You're not going to see whether it's right or wrong. That's not something you experience. So you don't get there from either approach. So remember in Philosophy 102 we talked about value judgments. What's the difference between value judgments and facts? Many people are confused about it. If you didn't take Philosophy 102, you may not know. But for the most part, value judgment is a judgment when something is good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse, more important or less important than some other thing. And this is actually the biggest reason why people disagree. They don't really disagree about facts. They think they do, but they don't. They disagree about values. They disagree when they at the core is the question, is it good or bad? And is it good or bad is not a question of fact. Right? For example, is it good or bad to kill somebody? Well, somebody can say, yes, it's good. Let's take a more controversial topic. Is it good or bad to have an abortion?
It's more of a personal opinion with that.
Well, no, you know, some people would say, no, it's not. Some people would say, it's never good to have an abortion. It's always bad. Right? There are people like this. And other people disagree. They say, no. That really depends. Like, obviously, nobody's saying you should always have an abortion. That would be crazy. But some people say there are circumstances where it's allowed. As long as it's not certain time after the pregnancy, so like the fetus is still small, and maybe in cases of rape, some people say in cases of rape, right? So you see people, and then people bring the facts. They say, okay, this particular person on this day got pregnant, blah, blah, blah. But those facts only serve as a backup for their values. They don't actually themselves mean anything, because what is the other person they're going to do? They bring their facts. When you see disagreements online, like on Facebook or something, people always are so passionate, and everybody says, this is the truth. And the other person, no, this is the truth. When in reality, they are talking about values. They're talking about whether something is good, bad, right, wrong, more important, less important. And those are not facts. There's infinite number of facts in the world. Like literally infinite. So you can always get, like, suppose that this is all facts, right? Whatever they are. So one person can always speak like these facts and say, they prove my point. And the other person will take this fact and say, no, they prove my point. Right? And that is true, and you've seen it. Like whatever you take, and it seems like it's so frustrating always. Why? Because you cannot convince the other person. You are so sure that your point of view is correct one. But there's 10 people, they bring some other facts all the time. And it's like, it just makes you mad. And it makes them mad. And I've never seen anybody being convinced by this. Have you seen anybody being convinced? Like if you argue over abortion or something, and then in the end somebody says, okay, I think you're right. That would be nice, but that never happens. What is at the core of this? Values, your personal values, your history, who you are, how did you grow up, what do you believe in? That's what makes it, and that cannot be changed with the conversation. Somebody is not going to change their background or childhood just because you talk to them or convince them about something. So that is a very important point. So back to Hume, morality, according to him, arises from passion, not from reason. He says, in terms of matters of fact, you can never find it till you turn your reflection into your own breast and find a sentiment of disapproval, which arises in you towards this action. So you yourself feel that the murder is wrong. There's no reason for that. It's just how you feel. And since you feel this way, you use reason to justify it. And similarly in other cases. For example, you may feel that, whatever Trump administration is doing right now is wrong, and then you bring your reason to find facts which support your point of view. Like, for example, you can say, look at these innocent people who have been deported. Right? This is the facts. Now, how about the other side? Well, they can bring their facts, right? Can't they? They can say, no, look at these innocent people who were raped and murdered by those illegal immigrants. This is also facts. But both sides base it on their passions, on their feelings about the whole thing. Some people maybe just hate immigrants, and to them immigrants can do no, right? Just because they have different colors, speak different language, people are really, really bad about this. There's something about us when we like people who look like us. We feel more at ease with them, right? And that's one of the things about human beings. And when somebody looks differently, different color, different gender, people get kind of uncomfortable. And they don't want to be uncomfortable, so they act on this. And even though reasonably that person of different color or different gender may be the nicest person and there's no danger there whatsoever, but they don't even want to learn that. They want to just put a barrier there, like send them back to their country. That's an easy solution. I don't want to see it, just in case. Right? So that is how these things work. And according to Hume, we always are driven by our feelings in the first place. Reason comes later. Reason just supports our feelings. And this reason can justify anything. Feelings cannot but conform to reason. So there's a couple of good examples. He says, "'Tis not contrary to reason to prefer the destruction of the whole world to the scratching of my finger." Right? So there's no reason why somebody whose finger scratches and to stop this itch in your finger, the only solution is destruction of the entire world. There's no reason why this person can't say, sure, let's destroy the entire world. On the same time, it is not contrary to reason to choose my total ruin to prevent the least uneasiness of an Indian or person wholly unknown to me. So that's the opposite, right? So just as there is no reason why I cannot just allow the destruction of the entire world just to scratch my finger, equally, there is no reason why I can't sacrifice my entire life just to make sure this other person feels a little bit more comfortable. But why? What's the difference? The feeling, the way we feel about it, that's what at the core of it. Not reason, but the feeling we have. Reason is a slave to the passions. Reason is and ought to be the slave to the passions and can never pretend to any other office than to serve and obey them. Morality, therefore, is more properly felt than judged. So that's what Hume is famous for. What are the sources of the moral rules in reality? He's saying, well, one of them is social utility, right? Some moral rules do not seem to follow from our natural inclinations. For example, justice, the obligation to keep promises, allegiance to government, chastity. But in the long run, social utility or practical convenience motivates us to follow these rules. So on one hand, let's say, obligation to keep promises, wouldn't it be nice if you are the only one who could break promises? If somebody promises you something, they all keep their word. But you can break your word anytime. Do you think it would be nice? What do you guys think? Well, it seems like it is, of course, impossible. But if it was possible, would it be nice?
Maybe for your ego it would be nice.
Not just for ego. I mean, let's look at one of the obligations is credit, right? When people borrow money from you, do you want them to return it to you? Yeah. How about you? If you borrow money, would it be nice if you didn't have to return it? Yeah, come on. If your answer is no, you are just lying to yourself. Of course it's nice. I mean, think about it, especially if it's not like your mother or something. Then, of course, it would be uncomfortable. But what if it's a bank? You took money from the bank, and then bank says, yeah, you don't have to pay it back. Wouldn't it be nice? Of course it would be nice. Although bank is what? It's a bunch of other people. I mean, but there's no bank which is like Mars or something. Banks steal other people's money. But you think about it as more impersonal because it's not like one person. It's not like Uncle Joe or something. It is some bankers who make millions. So yeah, obviously it would be nice if you could, but what's the problem? The problem is if you are breaking your promises, other people will be breaking promises too. And then everybody will be making promises. And then if you don't return money you borrow, and other people don't return money they borrow, what happens then? Then nobody gonna loan money. Because why the hell would somebody give somebody else money knowing they're not gonna get it back? So then you start thinking, okay, I guess if that's the way it works, I will repay money too. Right? Not because I like it, but because otherwise everybody will not return money, and then everybody will not loan money, and sometimes I need money and I don't have them, so I do kind of wanted to have them. So for this reason, let's just do it. Let's just return them, at least for the most part. And it's same thing with other stuff, like theft, taking other people's property. If you are the only one who could take anything you want and nobody else would be able to do it, it seems nice. Doesn't it seem nice? Yeah, it seems nice. But the problem is what? It doesn't work that way. If you can take other stuff, they can take your stuff too. And so before you know it, you have nothing. Because, yeah, you took some stuff from somebody else, but then 10 other people came and take everything from you. And I was like, okay, that's not good now. That's not what I wanted to have. So that's why social utility, us living in society together and figuring out that certain rules have to be followed, is why we agree to that. And then sympathy. He says that is real too, right? The injustice is, even if injustice is so distant from us as no way to affect our interest, it still displeases us. So indeed, there is something about it. Like when you hear about children starving somewhere in Somalia or something, it doesn't seem like it affects you. Those are not your children. But doesn't it still kind of affect you? You still feel bad about it, right? At least normal person, not a psychopath. Maybe psychopaths don't feel anything, but normal people do. And so you kind of want to prevent it. How much do you want to do about it? That's different. Some people are really passionate about it. They donate money and everything. Other people are more like, yeah, it's not nice, but I have my problems. So let me just sort them out first. Nonetheless, you would still, for the most part, agree that it makes us uncomfortable. And the more we know about it, the more uncomfortable we are. Because like abstractly, okay, some children somewhere are starving. That's not as bad. But when you start seeing pictures of them or something, like a video with children who are really like malnourished, then you feel it more. And it's normal, and it's again your feelings, and then based on that, you can use your reason to try to figure out how to take care of that. Can we take care of that? Can we help them out? Or if we donate to charity, it will just be stolen by some other clever people who just make the whole thing up so they could enrich themselves. Right? So this is already when the reason starts kicking in. And finally, his contribution to religion. He was a well-known agnostic, actually. He was not himself an atheist, but he did really criticize this entire proof of the existence of God. His famous dialogues concerning natural religion do go over all the proofs of the existence of God and basically say they all fail. None of them is capable of proving the existence of God. At best, even if they can prove existence of something, like some sort of first cause, that would not be traditional God of Christianity. So, first of all, remember this famous argument based on the greatest thing, like the God's existence proven because the definition of God is the greatest thing, right? And God, if he didn't exist, wouldn't be the greatest thing. He's saying, well, existence is actually not the quality you can add to something to make it even better. Existence is, how do we know something exists? It's an experience. We have to really have an experience of something existing to say it exists. So consequently, there is no being whose existence is demonstrable. You cannot prove the existence of God based on definition. Then he also goes over first cause, right? Everything, remember this other argument that everything has a cause, the universe must have a cause. So again, he's saying, no, that's not how it works. As far he already criticized the whole idea of cause and effect, and he's saying, how do you know universe must have a cause? where did you get this idea? You didn't even experience, like with gravity, okay, I dropped many bottles, they all fell. How many universes did you see created? 0, right? So how do you know they must have a cause? That's to him also not a proof. And 5 more difficulties, he's saying, from finite effect you cannot conclude infinite cause, right? Because if you think, okay, let's assume God created the world. And the way they usually say is the world is finite. So in order for something to create it, that something has to be infinite. Hume say, why? Why does it have to be infinite? If you have 2 scales, and you know one of them is heavier than the other, does it mean it has to be infinitely heavier? No, it can have just a little bit more. So maybe God just has a little bit more reality than the world, not infinite reality. Effect is not perfect. Why should the cause be perfect? The world is not perfect. Why do I think God is perfect? If God created the world the way it is, there's a lot of problems in this world. He probably didn't do that good of a job. Designer may not have been that excellent. There may have been many other world's creation attempts which are failed. So maybe God was creating worlds, they were really bad, and he was destroying them, and another one, and ours maybe like version number 15. What evidence do we have that there is only one God? Wouldn't the team of gods be better than one? If they created the world, there must be more than one. So he did kind of criticize this entire idea. Also, he got this idea of development of the world. He's saying the world is more of a vegetable than a clock. Right? The world doesn't seem like the clock works in mechanical way. The world seems to be going like more like the real life. So that's his famous contributions. Okay, we still have a couple of minutes. But in overall, like I said, he was not an atheist. He was agnostic. He was saying, I'm not saying there's no God. I'm just saying all that stuff does not prove the existence of God. Maybe there is one. Maybe not. So how do we live now with all this doubt? You would think that like being so critical, how is he getting out of bed? How is he like having his breakfast? He's saying, oh, it doesn't stop me at all. Like the fact that I don't know for sure that things are real doesn't preclude me from enjoying the breakfast. I mean, maybe it's real, maybe it's not real. I'm still enjoying it. So that's how we should live this life. He said, we will never know for a fact that things exist, that they are the way they are, but we should pretend. We should go on with the flow, right? Whatever works for us.